Hallie's going to end up being some sort of movie director or something. All right, President Grant, he ends up following Andrew Johnson, right? So Grant's going to be president during Reconstruction. We didn't talk... That was awful. We didn't talk much about him because he didn't do much when it comes to Reconstruction. Historians have put him as, if not the worst, then the second or third worst president we've ever had. Ironically, he got elected twice and probably could have been elected more than that. He was popular, but awful. Okay? So you're like, what's this here? What's this here? How does someone who's so popular get elected so many times? Awesome question, weird accent. I'll tell you. It's a civil war. In fact, the Republican Party is going to dominate politics from Lincoln all the way to the 1930s. In fact, from 1860, which is when Lincoln was elected, until 1932 was when FDR was elected, only 2 Democrats got voted in. Think about that. From 1860 to 1932, that's 72 years, only 2 Democrats were elected. And a lot of it was because of the Civil War. In fact, every Republican president from Grant all the way until McKinley, or before Roosevelt, all of them were officers in the Civil War. Many of them were generals in the Civil War. Most officers. Right? So, how do you get elected? Well, you what's called wave the bloody shirt. You remind voters, hey, remember the Civil War? I was with you on the front. I helped us win the war. So you have all of these northern people, all these northern men, and they fought in the Civil War. And now the person that was a general on their battlefield is now asking them for their vote for office. Does that make sense? And there's a huge kinship. I bet if you ever had any, does anyone have any relatives who were in wars, whether it was a great-grandfather in World War II or Vietnam or something, they talk about like how it bonds people, right? And so that is one of the ways that people got elected. They kept reminding northern voters about the Civil War. Who's not voting for Grant when he reminds them of the Civil War?
The South.
The South. He does not get a ton of southern votes, but what did Lincoln's election teach us? Where's all the population go? Well, but who does the West vote with? The North, right? So the population is immigrants coming in and Northerners, and he doesn't need the South. The South votes Democrat, but Grant didn't care. He wins pretty easily, and he becomes a president. One thing I want to talk about, and to really understand, to really get the this whole unit, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to not teach you actual history stuff. I'm going to teach you an idea so you understand this, okay? Understanding what I'm going to teach you helps you really get this unit. It makes a lot more sense, okay? Okay. So, here's America. I'm going to bring this out in case anybody knows what America looks like. Here's America, people at home. And by people at home, I mean, you know, Michaela and Austin. Okay, here's America. As Tevis so rightly told us, where are many Americans moving? West. Now the North is getting more population, but what's one reason why the North is getting more population? Immigration, right? So you got people coming into the North, but you've also got people moving west. Does this make sense? Okay? And so here is the West. West. Alright? Now remind me, does that look just like the West? I think it looks just like the West.
Yep.
Now remind me, what laws are helping incentivizing people moving west? They were passed during the Civil War. Lindsay, which one?
Homestead Act.
Yeah, the Homestead Act's one, right? Free land, people who move this way. What are some other laws that are helping to incentivize people moving west? JC?
Called the Morrill Railroad.
Okay, you're mixing two of them. The Morrill Land Grant Act, that's where they're selling land cheaply and taking the money for for colleges and stuff, state colleges. The Pacific Railway Act. Where did the Pacific Railway Act start? Do what? Yeah, Transcontinental Railroad, right? And if you'll remember, those companies were given tons and tons of land. They were given, when the trains went through, they were given 3 miles of land on either side of the track, right? And so what could they do with the land they weren't using?
Sell
sell it off to cheap for farmers, right? Are you seeing that there's lots of reasons people can move west to cheap land? Okay? So now you have these farmers. Can you see my glorious thing? Okay, I don't want you to not experience it. Alright, it's like not seeing the Mona Lisa. It's like going to the Louvre and not seeing the Mona Lisa, right? Okay, has anybody you've seen the Mona Lisa, right? It's itty bitty, by the way. If you haven't seen it, you're like, I cannot wait to see the Mona Lisa. And there's always a bunch of people around and taking pictures, and it's like this big. It's one of the least impressive things in the Louvre, right?
This huge line, and you get all the way up there, and it's about as big as my dad's.
Yeah, you gotta do it because you gotta see it because you gotta say you've seen Da Vinci. But I thought the coolest part of the Louvre was the Louvre itself, right? The building itself is just ridiculous. But there is, by the way, and I no longer take kids to a DC trip because I was told not to. But there is a Da Vinci in Washington. Did you know that? The only Da Vinci in the Western Hemisphere is in Washington. It's cool to see that's a Da Vinci. I don't know how awesome any is, but I guess I couldn't do it. Okay. Anyway, so now you're a small farmer, right? You've got your small farm. And all these people have these small farms, right? Right in little 160 acre or 250 acre plots, right? You with me? Now, one of the problems, though, as time is going on, as we're getting into the late 1800s, is they're having to compete against bigger farms. Many of you who've seen larger, like agricultural areas, there are small farmers and there's big farms, right? And one way, if you're growing wheat or corn, if you want to compete, you have to grow more and more, right? Well, what are some things that are changing the way farmers are having to farm? Yeah, it's all about technology. And now you need things like tractors, right? And reapers and tillers. Does this make sense? And it used to be you were able to sell your stuff and on a market and went somewhere, but now you have railroads. So if you want to, remember we talked about how increasingly this part of the country was feeding every place else? Well, when you make your wheat or your corn, how do they get it this way, quickly? The railroads. So you have to use railroads, right? Now, if you want to get, and this is all dependent, in fact, this is why, have you ever seen or read The Wizard of Oz? You haven't read it before? The book is way different, right, than the movie. Way different. It's actually about what I'm talking about. It's about small farmers. It's an allegory for small farmers in the 1896 election, actually. And so now you're a farmer, right? And you need this technology. Well, you don't have enough money, so if you're a farmer, what do you have to do if you want to afford these tractors and these reapers and these tillers? You have to get a loan. So you have to go to a bank. And you have to get a loan, right? And then you go to the manufacturer, right, the factory, and you get this new technology stuff, right? You with me? And then you have to rely on railroads. You have to rely on railroads to get your product there, okay? And what railroads were doing, and railroads became increasingly more corrupt as they were so vital, okay? So small farmers end up making banks rich, manufacturers rich, railroads rich. But who wasn't getting rich? Small farmers weren't getting rich. And part of it was over an issue of currency. And over the issue of something called the gold standard. Okay? This is huge. In the Wizard of Oz, how do they get to the path of Oz? What do they follow? The yellow brick road. What do you think the yellow brick road is an allegory for? Gold. Right? And by the way, Oz, could that also be an ounce of gold? Right?
Wow, that movie has big meaning.
By the way, and we'll get to it, farmers wanted, and out west we start, oh, we got the map. Did you say the map that shows us industry and money in the west? Yes, Keaton. In fact, I do. In fact, it's also in my favorite. All right. So now you have mining out west, right? So the west is mining. Now in the gold standard, here's what the gold standard means. The gold standard means the amount of money in circulation. What does circulation mean?
The
amount of money in circulation is the amount of money that we all pass around when we buy and sell crap, right? The amount of money in circulation must be equal to the amount of gold in the treasury. So our banking system in the United States holds on to a bunch of gold, right? You with me? And the amount of money that we put in circulation is backed up by gold. It's called the gold standard. So you know if you have money that's been issued by the United States, this is back then that money is backed up by actual hard currency. And what does that give that paper currency? It gives it value, right? It gives it worth. So when you trade that currency for goods and services, you know that that is actually worth something and it's redeemable for gold. Are you with me? Now, in fact, we didn't go up the gold standard full time. We went off a little bit during the Depression, and we went off full time during the 70s. We're no longer on the gold standard. But the gold standard did a couple good things, but one thing it also did was it failed to create inflation. No inflation. What is inflation?
Rising in prices.
It's an increase in prices. People in government economics should have known that. That row right there, that's disappointing. A raising of prices. Now for most people, is raising prices good?
Yes.
It depends, right? Now let me ask you this. Let's look at how a bank makes its money. How do banks make money? I'm going to draw a bank. Here's a bank.
It's a little interest on that.
Right, can that see me?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay. Do what?
Interest.
It makes money on interest, right? So here's Keaton right here. Here's his hair. Right? Smile. Here's his guitar. All right, hold on. Here's his. Hold on.
Sweater.
Let me draw a sweater.
Cardigan.
This guitar kind of looks like a shirt.
Yeah, he's got a sweater. It's much smaller than his guitar. All right. I'm done. That's actually the best one I've ever done. All right, now Keaton goes to the bank, and he is a small farmer. I can't even say that without laughing. All right, Keaton's a small farmer, and he goes to the bank, and let's say he gets $10,000 loan. Even today, if you're a farmer, like in Indiana, people go to the bank. Almost every year they go to a farmer's bank and they get a loan. And they get a loan because in the world of farming, you make all your money at one time. Does this make sense? You get a loan so you can buy seed and you can pay for your house and your car and your everything. And then you have your year's worth of stuff. You live off of your loan. At the end of the year, you harvest your product, right? You sell it all off for a big amount of money, and then what do? You sell off you pay off the loan and whatever else you have left as savings. Does this make sense? It's a very risky business if you're a small farmer. So now let's say Keaton gets $10,000. And let's say over a couple of years,